Hello and good morning. How's everybody doing today? This is Rich Harshaw, and we are here for our webinar on, well, it's sort of a book review. It's sort of a marketing writing instructions class. It's kind of a hybrid because the topic of the book is the plain English approach to business writing. I've taken the liberty to expand a little bit on the book, not to suggest that the book isn't sufficiently good in and of itself. But I've taken a lot of the principles out of this book and combined them with a couple of other principles here and there, and we're going to talk about basically how to write good marketing. And I'm going to strongly recommend that you find this book. Now, I have this book, and I've had this book for a long time. I'm not exactly sure when it came out, but I believe that this book has been updated since the time that I took the screenshot of this cover. So it may have a little bit different title or different looking cover. But what you're really looking for is the plain English approach to business writing, or something very similar to that by Edward P. Bailey. I can assure you this, the content of the book itself has not changed. They haven't come up with radical new concepts to put into the book. It's just one of those things that as time goes on, they update books and make the covers different and try to make it current and fresh, even though it's the same old information. The reality is the information from this book, the Plain English Approach to Business Writing, actually comes from a different book called How to Read, Write, and Think Effectively by Rudolph Flesch. I think I'll show you that book a little bit later. I read that book first in 1990. Yeah, well, maybe 1991. It's been a while ago. And this is a book, How to Read, Write, and Think Effectively by Rudolph Flesch. He was a German immigrant, and the book was written sometime, I believe, in the 1940s or something like that. And the book was fascinating to me as a young, aspiring, copywriting kind of guy. Got a lot of really good use out of it. However, the original book had a lot of, I don't even know how to explain it. Have you ever read Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, something like that? And the book was written such a long time ago that the style and nature of the language used was so different and foreign to what we're used to in contemporary reading and writing that it was distracting, and it was sort of hard to work through some areas of it, but the information was outstanding. And I remember reading that book and thinking, man, somebody needs to take this information because it's so good that they need to update the book and they need to put it into a more contemporary format with more up-to-date examples and things like that. And lo and behold, a few years later, I found this book called The Plain English Approach to Business Writing by Edward P. Bailey, Jr., and that's exactly what this is. It's a very thin volume. If you were to look at it from the side, it's no more than a quarter-inch thick. It won't take you years or weeks or even days of reading it. You can probably bust through it in about an hour to 2 hours, take some notes if you wanted to, and all of the great information from Rudolph Flesch's book distilled into one easy-to-read volume. And don't be fooled by the fact that it's a short book and it doesn't have a lot of pages, because, you know, the fundamental principles aren't really that many. It's a pretty narrow set of rules, and that's what we're going to go over today. So that's a little bit of a introduction to this book, and I think I've got a slide on that that's coming up. You'll see that other book. So let's go backwards a little bit before we get to the actual book. The three major parts to good writing. First thing is, what should you write about? Making sure that you're saying the right kinds of things to the right people at the right time. Number two, how do I create good headlines? Making sure you have the right interrupts that communicate your ideas quickly. And then third, how do I make the copy compelling? Using plain English. Now, I'm showing you this because I want you to understand where this topic of the plain English approach to business writing comes into play. And it comes in here as number 3. And I think this is an important distinction because, like I said, as a young aspiring copywriter, I was able to find a bunch of books. This goes back and predates the internet in the early 1990s. I found a bunch of books on copywriting, and they all seem to focus on number 3 here. How do I make the copy compelling? And I quickly realized as I became more and more proficient in my field of expertise that there's a lot of marketing that's written that's pretty good writing, number 3 on this list here. But if you're not talking about the right stuff and you're not saying the right thing at the right time to the right people, you can have powerful, great, awesome writing that's not going to make a hill of beans worth of difference because it's misguided. So we've got to start there. And, you know, we've got an entire program at Monopolize Your Marketplace called our methodology workbook and our methodology that we go through. And that's not the point of today's webinar, but that is something that you can look up in our archives. But I'll tell you this is an interesting topic. I just want to make sure that you embed it at the proper point in time in the writing process. How do you create good headlines? You know, this goes also back to methodology. What kind of things should I write about? Finding the right hot buttons. Well, let me just go to the next slide. The educational spectrum is where we find the right hot buttons: benefits of ownership, objections to ownership, vendor selection. If you're not familiar with these concepts, you're going to want to go back and listen to, as the easiest way to get caught up on these topics, listen to the audio book called The 5 Biggest Marketing Mistakes. It covers this concept in detail, and it's got a lot of really good examples. Getting inside John Smith's mind, you find the hot buttons, you rank the hot buttons. Do this on the educational spectrum section of the workbook that we've got. You rank them so you know where to start, and then you create the anchor statements. Allows you to keep on track and focus as you work through the headline and copy phases. Now, this may not make a ton of sense to you if you haven't gone through some of the fundamental MYM methodology exercises. And if you haven't, that's okay. Reach out to us if you need some guidance on that, and we'll push you in the right direction. But again, I just want you to make sure you understand the plain English approach to business writing doesn't really matter until you've accomplished making sure you've got the right hot buttons and you're saying the right kinds of things and you have the right headlines, okay? Creating headlines, again, this is also part of the methodology workbook and process that we've created. Creating John Smith statements that force you to see the world through John Smith's eyes. First person statement in quotes. Okay, again, this may or may not make sense to you depending on how much foundational understanding you have of what we do. Headline starters, there's 26 different premises of ways to start headlines. Those are found, again, on the methodology workbook. You can use them to kickstart your brain. And then, of course, we got the headline bank, which is an old standby, good for some instant offense. You know, this is something that you would use to get some quick, easy headlines, okay? So, number one, making sure that we're talking about the right stuff, the educational spectrum, hot buttons, ranking, anchor statements. Then number two, creating good headlines using these methodologies, John Smith statements, headline starters, headline bank. And then finally, we've got to write good copy. And this is where we're going to talk about our topic today, writing compelling copy. Right here on your screen is your English teacher yelling at you in high school because she wanted you to write a very specific way. And everything you learned in that high school English class, we are pretty much going to decimate and get rid of and obliterate and render it moot and unusable, okay? We're going to talk about the plain English method. The plain English method has these following principles at its core: using easy words, short sentences and paragraphs, active words, verbs. I'll talk more about each of these in detail. That's the point of this webinar, okay? Emphasis tools, punctuation, and you know, this is the point where some people start kind of rolling their eyes and going, oh geez, punctuation. But I'm going to tell you, man, if you don't understand how to use emphasis tools, active words, punctuation properly in your writing, it's going to kill its effectiveness, okay? Concreteness, untangling, again, we'll get to this stuff. Simplified formatting, using specificity, using few articles and prepositions. These are some of the things we're going to talk about today. Again, to make the point clear, some people look at this kind of stuff and say, it's not really my bailiwick. It's not what I'm interested in. I'm not that good at it. Well, there's two ways to look at that. Number one is, okay, well, learn this stuff at least on a cursory level so that you can understand it, identify it, and at least spot the lack of this stuff being done properly in writing. And number two is, well, maybe you should get good at it. Now, if you have somebody else write your marketing and you feel comfortable and confident with their abilities, then that's one thing. But, you know, I'm the kind of guy, I like to be at least a little bit proficient in all the different stuff that we do. You know, one of the services that we offer to our clients is search engine optimization. And I guarantee you, I'm no nerd and I don't understand programming and I'm not any kind of SEO guru, but I understand the general ideas and principles of it. I can go into anybody's website. I can look at the source code. I can tell if the source code is written well or if it's not written well. Now, I couldn't write the code myself to save my life. I don't know how to do it, but I know how to evaluate what somebody else has done and take a look at it. I know what should be there and what shouldn't be there. I know what the basic components of SEO are. And that's kind of what I'm asking you to do, is to at least learn some of this stuff so that as you start looking at the writing that you're producing for your company, because whether you write it or not, it's going to be produced, you can have a better ability to evaluate it, okay? So let's talk about plain English writing for business. Okay, here's the book that I talked about that I saw in 1991, How to Write, Speak, and Think. I said how to read, write, and think effectively. It's how to write, speak, and think more effectively. Funny thing about this book, I read it. It was a little paperback book, you know, the small size paperback. The part about writing was outstanding. The part about speaking was so-so. The part about thinking was so bad. I thought it was such a terrible piece of advice that I actually literally physically took the book, ripped it in half, and taped the front half of the book spine so it wouldn't fall to shreds and all the pages come out. And I have half of this book still to this day, and the other half I threw away, 2 decades ago because it was so terrible. But the writing part was outstanding. Like I said, it then became this book on the right, okay? Let's talk about wordsmithing. Wordsmithing is the difference between good and great results. This is really what we're trying to accomplish with this discussion today. This is where the direct marketing guys focus their attention. They have a formula that's called AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action. AIDA, wordsmithing. Wordsmithing, though, is not going to make a hill of beans worth of difference if the hot buttons and headlines are wrong, like I've mentioned earlier. So these guys that are talking all about their AIDA and attention and desire, I don't really use formulas like that. I don't think those kinds of formulas really get the job done. I think what gets the job done is the MOM methodology that says, first of all, what are the hot buttons? What should we be talking about? Let's make sure that we've got the right audience. Then let's teach you how to look through the world, look through the eyes of John Smith's world so that you can write things that are going to resonate with John Smith. Then when you get down to the copywriting, it's a matter of saying it in a powerful way that's going to really resonate. So that's what we're trying to do, okay? You can get good results with so-so wordsmithing. The longer you do this, the more you practice, the better you get. I mean, this is like anything else in life. Think about learning a language or learning a musical instrument. Those are the two best analogies that I can give you for what it's like to learn how to write well and to wordsmith. I mean, anybody can sit down and say taco bueno casa de blanca and say that they're speaking Spanish, but the reality is if you want to learn it, you have to sit down and you have to put yourself through the paces. Same thing with a guitar. You can sit down and pound on it and make sounds that come out of it, but that doesn't mean you're playing the guitar. You can learn some elementary chords, but to really get good at it, it's going to take practice. And it's the same thing with wordsmithing, okay? Here's what plain English is. It's simple. Now, we're going to talk about Chinese for just a minute. This is a discussion that was found in the original book by Rudolf Flesch, How to Write, Speak, and Think Effectively, which after I got done with it became just How to Write Effectively. But here's the discussion that's in there that's pretty interesting. He says that if you understand Chinese, you can understand how to write English better. Now, this was a fascinating concept to me because I read this book for the first time in 1991 as I was living in Taipei, Taiwan. I had already lived there for 2 years as a missionary, learned the language fluently, and then I was back for that summer in 1991 teaching English for about 2 or 3 months, earning a boatload of cash so that I could afford to go to college. And so this really struck me as true because I understand Chinese. I speak it fluently, not so fluent anymore, but fluent enough. Back in those days in 1991, I was absolutely fluent. I could write something like 2,000 or 3,000 characters, and I could have basically any discussion on any topic at that particular time. Now, here's what's interesting about Chinese. It's what Rudolf Flesch calls an assembly line language. Whoops. None of the things in Chinese grammar it doesn't have anything that makes other languages cumbersome. Like, it has no conjugations, no irregular verbs, no inflections, no participles, no gerunds, no articles. Every word is one syllable, And the sentence structure is the same as English: subject, predicate, object. Now, this makes learning to speak Chinese extraordinarily easy. Most people think, oh, Chinese would be the hardest language in the world to learn. It does have tones, and so that makes it a little bit more challenging. But once you understand and master the concept of tones, which takes about 1 day to understand the principle, and then it just becomes a matter of learning which tone out of 4. There's only 4 tones in Mandarin. There's, I think, 7 in Cantonese, so it's a little harder. But there's 4 tones in Mandarin, and all you've got to do is memorize which tone goes with a given word. That's it. So it's not that difficult. The tones are consistent from word to word. Okay, there's a rising tone and a falling tone and a high tone and a low tone. But it's easy to learn that principle. Now, here's the point. I'm not trying to get too bogged down on this. I just want you to understand. It's an assembly line language. And the reason it's assembly line language is because it's so old. And if you understand the principle of evolution, and I'm not talking about, apes turning into humans. What I'm talking about is things evolving and becoming more efficient over time. What happened is, over the course of 6,000 years of Chinese language, they got rid of all of the things that were non-essential, and they simplified the language instead of making it more complicated. So if I wanted to say, for instance, I go home in Chinese, I would say, 我, me, go, 回, which actually means return, 家, which means home. I go home. 我回家. Now, if I wanted to say, I am going to go home, I would say it exactly the same. If I wanted to say, I went home, I would say it exactly the same. And it's the same structure. I go home. Now, you might think, well, how is that even possible that you can have this language that is that elementary? And the answer is, it's all context-driven, okay? You understand the context of what is being said to understand if it's I went home, or I'm going home, or I am home, or whatever the case is, okay? So it's very simple. That's the point. And what we want to do is we want to endeavor to make our English as simple as possible. Maybe not as simple as Chinese, but as simple as possible. Let me give you some ideas. This is a quote from Rosser Reeves, one of the early copywriters that was achieved some level of notoriety back in the 1950s. Let's say you've got $1 million tied up in your little company, and suddenly, for reasons unknown to you, your advertising isn't working. Your sales are going down. Everything depends on it. Your future depends on it. Your family's future depends on it. I walk into this office, sit down in this chair. What do you want from me? Fine writing? Do you want masterpieces? Do you want glowing things that can be framed by copywriters? Or do you want to see the blinking sales curve stop going down and start moving up? This is what we're trying to accomplish. And I put this on this slideshow at this particular moment because I want you to understand this stuff flies in the face of things that you learned in English. English class taught you to write in a flowery, I don't even know how to call it, the sophisticated, educated kind of a way. Now, that might suggest, oh, well, we don't want to be sophisticated or educated. No, it means we want to use plain English. We want to say things in a very simple way instead of in as complicated of a way as possible. Write like people talk. This is the #1 principle that I want you to understand. Write like people talk. You instantly become more relatable. Forget everything you learned in English class. Fancy words are going to draw attention to your real intent, which is to sell something. Use informal language. Now, I didn't say use ghetto-era type slang that doesn't make any sense to normal people. Use informal language. I'll give you examples of this in just a minute. Find specific languages from your customer surveys. If you have them, use that. Don't assume because your target market is educated that they need to be written to on a higher, more complicated level. They're still just people who talk casually to other people, okay? The neurosurgeon still puts his pants on one leg at a time is kind of the principle here. People are just people. If the neurosurgeon who has to deal with complicated surgery type matters, or the highfalutin attorney who drives the Mercedes-Benz and has the $30,000 watch, when he goes into Starbucks, he still looks at the person behind the counter and says, I'd like a what is it? I don't go to Starbucks, so I don't know. I'd like a large coffee, please. Okay, it's just normal language. use plain talk, okay? It's a way of expressing your ideas clearly. Style, writing clear, readable sentences, writing like people talk. In organization, starting with the main point, main points are easy to find. When you're writing for marketing and when you're writing for business, it is not a mystery novel. We do not want to build up to a crescendo. We want to start with the crescendo, okay? With the layout, the appearance of the page, the headings, the bullets, fonts, sizes, everything visually needs to help the reader see the underlying structure of your writing, okay? So this extends not just in the words, but the way it's laid out and organized on the page. Plain English is not limited to expressing only simple ideas. It works for all kinds of writing in all industries. It's just simple to understand, okay? All right, so here's some not plain English. This is just some examples from the book. And you can get the book and you can find these examples yourself. Each application shall be supported by a comprehensive letter of explanation in duplicate. This letter shall set forth all the facts required to present to this office a complete disclosure of the transaction. I don't even know what that means. Translated into plain English. You must send us the following: 1 copy of your application, 2 copies of a letter explaining the complete details of your transaction. Okay, that's pretty easy to understand, okay? Next. Why use plain English? It's easier for your reader to read. It's also easier for you to write. How have you produced most of the words in your life? By writing them or speaking them? Now, the obvious answer there is by speaking them. So you already know how to do this. Research shows PE, plain English, is easier to read regardless of how smart the reader is. We all take longer to read less familiar words like commence than familiar ones like begin. We actually help our readers by using plain English, okay? Does this make sense? Here is an example. Hello and thank you for calling. This is Pam Fahey, President and CEO of Empowerment Health Institute. I'm going to assume that since you've called this number, you or somebody you know is interested in losing weight. I'm also going to guess that there's a good chance that you've tried to lose weight before and that maybe, listen to this conversational plain English. Maybe you've been unsuccessful at keeping the weight off long term. Maybe you've tried some fad diets, drank chocolate shakes for 3 meals a day, taken as many as a dozen pills a day, joined a health club, or maybe even some weird exercise equipment from an infomercial, all without lasting results that you've been hoping for. So I understand that you might be skeptical of yet another weight loss program, especially one that claims that you can safely lose up to 5 pounds a week without all the usual starvation and deprivation associated with most weight loss plans. This is just a quick introduction of using plain English. Here's a couple more examples from some ad templates. Where in the blank is my blanking box order? That's called plain English. This is how people actually talk. One of the things I love about Judge Judy, and you guys know that I'm kind of a Judge Judy junkie. I think it's great entertainment. I watch it at night when I'm trying to relax and just get my mind off of everything. Judge Judy, she has a way of forcing people to use plain English. So here's what she'll do. Somebody will be telling their side of the story, and she will force them to stop telling the story and instead phrase it in the exact words that they used or heard at the time of the incident. So, for instance, somebody might say, okay, well, I was at the bar, and this guy was coming at me, so I started telling him, if you don't leave me alone, then we're going to have a big problem. And she goes, no, stop. I don't want to hear a narrative of what you said. I want to hear the exact words. When he approached you, what did you say? Well, I told the gentleman, no, don't tell me what you told the gentleman. When he was approaching, what did you say exactly? Well, I told him that he needed to back off. Really? In a bar fight situation, your words were, you need to back off? And then the guy's face, this happens like 1 out of 3 episodes of Judge Judy. The guy's countenance dropped, and then they have to start bleeping it. And he says, well, what I said was, back blanking off, or I'm going to blanking blank your blanking blank. And she goes, perfect. That's what I wanted to know. Okay, here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to write the way that people talk. But I give you this Judge Judy example because I think it's really illustrative of what we try to do naturally in a communications situation instead of what we really should be doing. What we try to do is we try to editorialize and we try to put some sort of commentary that sounds good in our mind and makes us look good and educated, when in reality we need to just be speaking the way that we actually would speak. So instead of, as the gentleman approached, I told him that he needed to back off or there might be a problem, becomes, hey, you mother blanking piece of blank, if you don't blanking blank, then I'm going to blank your blanking blank, blanking blanker. Okay. Now, I'm being a little facetious here, and I'm not trying to recommend that you use a bunch of cuss words like I just did. I blanked them out and is on the screen here. But I like this example because here's what it does. The unedited raw emotion that is the real way that people talk is what we're trying to get across. Now, I'm going to go backwards. Okay, there's no cussing involved. It's not about, if you heard the cussing, then you missed the point. The cussing makes the point very clear that we want to say what we really mean. But here's what we say in the middle of this thing that's on your screen right now. Let me go back over here. Let me look at something here real quick. Give me a second. I can't see what I'm looking for here. Oh, there it is. Okay. Maybe you've tried some fad diets, drank chocolate shakes, taken as many as a dozen pills a day, joined a health club, or maybe even bought some weird exercise equipment from an infomercial. See, this is a great example of just saying stuff. Maybe even bought some weird exercise equipment. Well, have you ever seen the Buttmaster or the Thighmaster? This is some weird junk, okay? This is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to challenge you to think because, again, like the Judge Judy example, the tendency is to editorialize and to put commentary in instead of just saying it. And I'm encouraging you to just say it, okay? Suppose you unexpectedly ran out of boxes and had to shut down your production line for 3 days. Do you have a backup plan? Next time you need custom boxes now and your current supplier can't get it in time, let us design, produce, and deliver your order in just 4 hours. Plain talk, okay? Short sentences. The average sentence should be 17 words. 25 words is too long. Don't try to stick 2 thoughts into 1 sentence. Instead, use 2 sentences, okay? Think about the USA Today, and I'm going to show you an example from a USA Today article. It's been said that it's written on a 6th grade level, and people say that sort of in a deriding, mocking kind of way. Well, you know, USA Today is written on a 6th grade level. Well, the reason is because it's so much easier to understand. Look at this example. Possible Ebola case surfaces in Canada. A woman who arrived from Congo and fell ill in Canada is being tested for hemorrhagic viruses. Now, that's a big word, but it's appropriate because that's just what it is. But look at everything surrounding it, including Ebola. Doctors said Tuesday. The identity of the woman has not been released. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 words. She was admitted to a Hamilton hospital on Sunday and has been described as drifting in and out of consciousness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. It's getting a little bit long. The viral hemorrhagic fevers suspected are a group of contagious tropical infections that are life-threatening. Doctors say the illness could also be malaria or meningitis, an infection of the fluid of the spinal cord and brain. I want you to just look at the simpleness of the writing involved here. Even though it's a fairly complex topic and it has some complex things in it like meningitis and hemorrhagic viruses, or however you say that, it's written in short sentences, okay? Don't use $5 words. Prefer the familiar word to the far-fetched, the concrete word to the abstract, short word to the long one. And I've got the nerd on here looking up stuff in the dictionary. That should not be you. You don't get bonus points for being a nerd, okay? No bonus points for winning the spelling bee in business. Let me give you some examples. Okay, so instead of the word encourage, use the word urge. And you say, well, I don't know that the word encourage is all that hard for people to understand. I mean, what are people, stupid? Is that what you're trying to tell me? And I'm not saying they're stupid. I'm saying the more you make it easy, the better it's going to be for you. Instead of continue, use keep up. Add to. Use the word get or gain instead of acquire. Get. Along the lines of becomes like, as to becomes about, for the reason that becomes since, in order to, just to. In the event of is just if. In accordance with, notice a lot of these things on the left-hand side sound awfully close to what you would hear from an attorney. Prior to, with regard to, accordingly, likewise, nevertheless, okay? And you can see some examples of these in the book if you got it from page 127, okay? Here's some exercises for you. Here's the first one. I learned this one. This is just something cute that I learned as a teenager. My gastronomical satiety admonishes me to such an extent that I am no longer able to indulge myself beyond the limits of dietary integrity. Do you even know what that means? Here's what it means. It means I'm full. That's what it means. I've eaten enough. My gastronomical satiety admonishes me to such an extent that I'm no longer able to indulge myself beyond the limits of dietary integrity. Now, if you want to get a laugh at a dinner party, just say this after you're finished eating, and people will, number one, think you're weird, but number two, they'll think it's pretty funny. It has come to my attention that the referee in the situation, although properly positioned to make the call, failed to acknowledge the intentional foul Mr. Wright attempted to commit on Mr. Anthony, and as a result may have negatively impacted the ultimate outcome of the game. Well, what happened? Well, a referee blew a call. Let's see if we can put this into plain English. The referee was in the right place, but he didn't call the intentional foul, which ended up costing them the game. That's how you would say it in plain English. All right, here's a big paragraph. Look at this. And I'm showing you these not even so much to say here's an exercise and try to simplify it, but I want you to see these examples of complex writing unnecessarily so. In an effort to acquire greater exposure for their tournament, the city of San Antonio has endeavored to implement a plan to engage numerous charities in their efforts. Look at the words in there. Effort, acquire, exposure, endeavored, implement, engage, numerous. We got 7 words that are freaking big and clunky in there. We could say just this: to get more exposure for their tournament, San Antonio has put a plan in place to get charities to help with their efforts, to get charities to help. Okay, prior to this time, a limited number of charities were permitted to participate, and the emphasis remained focused on the golf tournament itself. The tour personnel revealed there was insufficient financial incentive to permit the tour stop to gain status as FedEx Cup event until such a time a viable alternative plan could be implemented. Said plan was a joint effort of several city executives who declined to offer further details. Okay, this is the kind of crap that people like to write because it sounds, like they're smart or something. I don't know. Don't try to prove how smart you are with your writing. Try to prove how smart you are with your checkbook, okay? Use figures, symbols, and abbreviations. Just again, simplifying. In 13, most people over 16 have the IQ to tell a memo from a phone call or the SEC from the FTC. Cut out needless words. This is what we call word efficiency. Instead of prior to, say before. Instead of factual information, say facts. Now, this is, if you want to get good at word efficiency, try writing radio commercials or TV commercials, because you've got a very definitive, limited amount of time. You've got 60 or 30 seconds in a radio commercial. You've got 30 or 15 seconds in a TV commercial, and you have to be ruthless in editing to make your point still the way you want to make it, but with very, very few words. So it's an interesting exercise to write some commercials. Use contractions. You speak contractions, don't you? There's no law that says you can't write them. You speak contractions, do not you? There is no law that says you cannot write them. Now, this is, again, one of those English teacher things. They tell you don't put contractions in your in your writing. It's just dumb. There's no excuse for cutting out contractions. It doesn't make you sound smarter. It makes you sound weird. In fact, you ever seen this movie before? It's called True Grit. There was a John Wayne version of it, I think, and then a couple years ago, Jeff Bridges came out and made this movie, True Grit. And one of the things that people noticed a lot in this movie, is kind of funny, is that they didn't use any contractions in the movie. And it was so obvious and noticeable that it became sort of a topic when people were discussing this movie. So if you want to see what it's like to have no contractions, go rent this movie, True Grit, and watch it, and you will see that it's very awkward when people write without contractions, okay? Anyway, just for fun. Next, use few articles, prepositions, and conjunctions. 25 words account for 1/3 of all English writing. Here they are. The, and, to, of, I, in, was, that, he, it, you, for, had, is, with, she, has, on, at, have, but, me, my, not. 25 words account for about 1/3 of all words in English writing. The is about 5% all by itself, and is about 3%. Okay, so I'm not telling you to get rid of these words and don't use them. I'm saying think about it. Be a little more deliberate in the way that you write. Cut out all the unnecessaries, thes, ands, that's, and ofs. Evidence we have instead of the evidence we have. Instead of the consumer, we just say consumers. And can often be replaced by a comma or semicolon. That can be left out of half the time. See, half of the time or just half the time. That I'm kind of using my own medicine there. He said he agreed instead of he said that he agreed. The policy anniversary date instead of the anniversary date of the policy. Okay, so just think about being a little more efficient. Personal references, names, pronouns. Instead of repeating over and over the Inter-Allied Doodle Manufacturing Company, just say it or they. Human interest words. Here's the best word to use. You. Not the best word to use. We. Now, I did not just tell you to use the word you 47 times in your writing, and I did not ban you from using the word we ever. I'm just giving you general principles, okay? Think about them. Live words. Most writing contains nothing more than nouns and adjectives glued together with prepositions is, was, are, we. That should be verbs, not prepositions. Here's some lists of active words. Now, I'm not giving you this list so that you can jot them down and then start inserting them into your writing. I'm just asking you to think about this a little bit as you start to write and find a way to put live words in. They communicate much more powerfully than non-live words, okay? Next is a specificity challenge. When you write something, think in terms of specificity. What specifically? Why? How much? How many? Specifically. How many typically? Where? When? Compared to what? Give me an example. The results of action-oriented writing are immediate, controllable, measurable. You'll lower your costs, increase results by more qualified prospects, okay? Now here's an interesting topic. It's called long copy versus short. How much information does the prospect need to control the information in the decision? That's what you should really be thinking, not in terms of some arbitrary short or long mandate for your copy, okay? You probably need more information to buy a computer than you would a stick of gum. A good, easy-to-read format will allow you to use more text, use video, audio, report formats to say what won't fit into an ad. Your offer will give them opportunity to request additional information they need, okay? So don't be afraid to use long copy if it's appropriate. Don't be afraid to use short copy if it's appropriate. Here's what I always like to say this. There's no such thing as long or short. There's only such thing as interesting or not interesting, relevant or not interesting. That's what you're looking for. Is what you're writing relevant or is it not relevant? Is it interesting or is it not interesting? And if it's interesting, then it can be as long as it needs to be, okay? Now let's talk about emphasis. This is the interesting little exercise. And this is going to help you understand how emphasis changes in spoken writing and how it needs to be translated onto written writing, okay? So here's what we've got. I didn't say you stole the money. 7 words. What does it mean? Well, it depends on what you emphasize. I didn't say you stole the money. 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 The emphasis changes 7 times in 7 different versions of this sentence. The words stay exactly 1,000% the same, but it gives us 7 completely different meanings of the words. This, I hope, this slide, I hope it sort of sparks something in you that makes you say to yourself, you know what? It's more than just the words. It's the way that the words are presented on the page. So let's give you some ideas. Emphasis tools. Emphasis tools allow the reader to hear your voice tone and inflection while reading. You can use emphasis tools like bold, italics, underlined, all caps, parentheses, okay? These are the major emphasis tools. Bold, italics, underlined, all caps, and parentheses. So just think about this as you're writing. And you can see that different types of emphasis tools might have a little bit different feel or flavor or tone to them, okay? Punctuation, this is one where most people sort of roll their eyes and try to avoid the topic at all costs. I'm suggesting to you that you need to master this, because this is really interesting. It allows the reader to hear your pausing and pacing while reading, okay? If you listen to people while they talk, there's a definite pace to what they're saying. And if you don't have the ability to mimic pacing and pausing in writing, then you're going to, miss a major part of your communication, okay? So let's talk about this. Between words, a normal pause between words is a white space. Between sentences is a period. If you want a shorter pause between words, you use a hyphen. If you want a shorter pause between sentences, use a semicolon or a colon. If you want a longer pause between words, you use a dash. A dash is the equivalent of 2 hyphens. If you want a longer pause between sentences, you start a new paragraph. Okay, sometimes people get confused on this paragraph. Oh, well, the paragraph means that's where we change to a new thought. Well, we like to use paragraphs to show that it's a shift of thought that requires a pause there in normal conversation, just like I'm pausing now, okay? Formatting. For printed marketing and advertising, formatting is of utmost importance. The layout of the ad, type fonts, type sizes, headlines, placement of individual words, colors can be influential. Now, this gets into a whole different book that we'll have to review at some other time in the future. The book is called, what's the book called? It's by Robin Williams, not the comedian actor, but the author, Robin Williams, and the book is called, it's just left my mind. I can't remember. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put all this stuff together into an example, and then we're going to wrap it up with this, okay? So this is a video production company, and if you ever talk to Judy Schaefer on the phone, ask her about this, because this is actually something that I wrote for her video production company back in the 90s when she was a client of mine, one of the very first clients of mine, and we've been working together off and on ever since. But this was for her company called JCV Video, okay? So here's sort of the premise of what we want to talk about in the letter. We're going to write a letter here. We can produce videos for less than competitors. We're a lot less than most people think. Our prices are about the same as they were 10 years ago. There are 4 reasons why others are more expensive. Their equipment is more expensive. Their production sessions are too long. They pay too much for voiceovers. And they have higher operating expenses, okay? You should pay less money, and if you don't, you'll get the same final product, but you'll just pay more money for it. This is what we're trying to communicate in this letter. We have a video that will tell you all the details of how we do what we do, okay? So let's look at it. This is the letter in just a big glob of text. The cost of producing quality corporate videos has fallen by 64% over the last 5 years, but most video production companies are still clinging to and charging you 1996 prices. Now this is an old letter. Doesn't matter though, the principles are what's important here. If you or your company is considering making a video for training programs, sales presentations, trade shows, or any other corporate communications, or if you've even thought about it, I would like to show you a way to produce a totally nonlinear professional quality video for about 1/3 the average industry cost. And then it goes on with this huge glob of text. Now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it into a format where it's a lot easier to pick things out. So we've got the headline now. The cost of producing quality corporate videos has fallen by 64% over the last 5 years, but most video production companies are still clinging to and charging you 1996 prices. Now, this is using what we call a headline funnel. We've got the bigger headline, then we've got the smaller headline, and it literally funnels the eye down and allows a person to self-select if they're interested in reading this or not. And then we've got paragraphs that allow people to see, okay, visually I can kind of glance through this. I look down to the middle section, I see a headline there, 4 reasons why our $5,000 10-minute video would cost you $15,000 to $25,000 at most other places. And then there's the 4 reasons. We've got another headline below that. Don't even consider making a corporate video until you've watched this revealing 6-minute video, 4 closely guarded, price-inflating secrets of the video production industry revealed at last. And you can see there that this becomes much easier to read. But here's what I want to do. I'm going to take this same letter, and I'm going to point some things out using color. First thing I want to point out is the use of pronouns. Now, this is one of the things that we talked about earlier. And I'm not going to read the letter again, but I want you to see, we talked about the word you and your and the word we. I want you to see here how many times we've done this in this letter. And if we start looking through here, I see the word we on there on the second paragraph. I see the word are on the first headline. And I see the word are a few times. I see the word we. Let's count how many times we see the word you or your, some derivative. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29 times. Talking about them and their needs, okay? That's the only point I'm trying to make here. Now let's go to the next color, which is green. And with the green, we're showing what we're showing here: power words, action words, clinging to, charging you. If you thought about it, very few, plain English words, free video, okay? Next, let's go to contractions. And you can see that we've got our fair share of contractions in here. And then, well, I guess that's it. Thought I had one more. Let me check my sources. I might have one more. Let me check my sources. Let's see. Oh, nope, I don't have one more. That's all I have. I stand corrected. So anyway, this is the idea that I want to share with you. It's called The Plain English Approach to Business Writing by Edward P. Bailey. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them right now. And if not, we will be done. So this would be your chance to type in a question or raise your hand right now. Go ahead. We've got a pretty good crowd on here today. If you've got a question that you'd like to ask about this, please feel free to raise your hand now on the console, or just type it in under the, let's see, questions part. Okay, I don't have any questions yet. I'm going to give you 5 more seconds to at least raise your hand or say, hey, I've got a question. Okay, I'm going to assume that means you have no questions. So that being said, thanks for participating today. We'll be back with you, next week, I think. We'll have some additional webinars, so we'll talk to you then. Thanks so much. Bye now.